So the partisan Republican Supreme Court has once again shown that it's nothing more than a shill for the Republican Party. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video, subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So as many of you know, I am a lawyer, and although I'm currently working as a college professor, I actually did practice law for a good decade or more. During that time, I can tell you I had kind of a frustrating experience. In fact, we used to kind of joke about it, my wife and I. And the joke was that somehow, in the magic lottery that there is that decides which judge a case gets assigned to, my cases would inevitably be assigned to the judge who was the worst judge for that particular case. For example, I had one case where a collections company had clearly violated the rights of my client. So I sued the collections company. We won. The court found that the collections company had violated what's called the automatic stay, which is a bankruptcy provision which stops collections companies from trying to collect from people in bankruptcy. But the judge essentially ruled that my client wasn't entitled to any damages as a result of that, essentially gave them no money. In another case, though, I was representing a collections company. In this case, a car dealership that had sold a car and was alleged to have violated the automatic stay against one of the parties who owed them money. Well, in that case, despite pretty light evidence, frankly, in favor of the other party, this judge, a different one from my other case, not only found in favor of the other party, but awarded substantial damages. Now, why couldn't I have had the judge who awards damages for violations of the automatic stay when I was pursuing a collections company that was a bad actor? And why couldn't I have had the judge who doesn't award damages for violations of the automatic stay when I was representing the client who had at least allegedly violated the automatic stay? This seemed to be a pattern in my career, unfortunately. But it just points to a reality here that most lawyers are aware of. And what it is that different judges have different ways of interpreting the law. A lot of the time, the prospects of your case depend a lot upon which judge you get. I remember having another conversation with a different attorney on a different case, where we were essentially comparing notes and talking about my prospects of success in the case against his client. And we had worked together on numerous cases, so we knew each other pretty well. And he acknowledged to me that if we were in front of a different judge, he'd probably have been screwed. But because of the judge that we'd drawn, he was likely to win. Now, if you think that that type of situation made me frustrated, you'd be right. But the truth is, there really wasn't much I could do about it. Occasionally, if the judge got something egregiously wrong, then I'd appeal the case. And I did appeal cases, and I did win on appeal on numerous occasions. But in a lot of cases, that adds time and adds expense to a process that already takes a long time and is difficult and expensive for my clients. So it kind of puts us in a bad position of trying to resolve a case where we're kind of behind the curve. And we know it just because of the judge that we drew. Now, in the kind of practice that I was involved in, which was primarily bankruptcy, a lot of the time the stakes weren't that great. I mean, we were talking about money usually. But it's a whole different matter when you're talking about the U.S. Supreme Court. Here, a lot of the time, we're talking about whether somebody gets the death penalty or not, whether somebody's rights are protected or not, whether a woman can have an abortion or not, and whether employees are allowed to organize to counter the bad behavior of their employers. I mean, for crying out loud, we even have a situation where President Biden isn't able to properly fight the coronavirus pandemic that we have going on in the country. And it has everything to do with simply who are the justices sitting on the Supreme Court. You see, I actually read the legislation that President Biden's vaccine mandate was based upon, and I can tell you, he had the authority to do what he did. The legislation was clear on that point, and yet the conservative majority ruled against him. Almost even more shocking is the idea that President Biden's mandate that healthcare facilities that receive Medicare funds would have a vaccine mandate had 4 Supreme Court justices vote against it. That is downright absurd. The idea that the federal government is able to attach riders, essentially, special requirements to the funds that it gives to the states and to other facilities, is settled law. And frankly, if we can't count on the Supreme Court to abide by that law, there's nothing that the Supreme Court won't take away. If you think your property rights are protected against, say, an overly aggressive employer or overly aggressive governmental entity, don't count on it with the Supreme Court. You don't know what they're going to do. If you think that you're entitled to the benefit of the doubt if you're charged with a crime, don't count on it with the Supreme Court. Clearly, they've made it evident that everything is on the table for them, and any law they don't like, they're just going to get rid of, no matter what the law said in the past. As Elena Kagan, Supreme Court Justice, wrote in one of her opinions, seldom has this court so casually, so offhandedly tossed aside precedent. That was in the 2020 decision of Ramos v. Louisiana. And since then, the court has gotten only more radical. You literally can no longer rely upon the rule of law in this country. You can no longer rely upon settled law to know whether your behavior is legal or not legal anymore. This is a big problem. The rule of law is fundamental to the American judicial system. The idea that the law is above everybody and no one is above the law goes back to the Magna Carta in England. And in the United States, we have in the Constitution a declaration that there can be no ex post facto laws. In other words, you can only be charged with a law that is the law when you commit the crime. You cannot be charged for a crime with a law that becomes the law after you commit the crime. In other words, you have a right to rely in choosing how you're going to behave on what the law says. Well, according to this Supreme Court, that's not the case. If they don't like what the law says, whether it's law established by prior Supreme Court precedent, or for that matter, a law established by Congress, for example, with the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court has simply tossed those things aside, said, no, we don't like it, we're going to do something different. You literally have no idea what these people are going to do. Frankly, whether you agree with a lot of the decisions that the Supreme Court has been making recently or disagree with them, this should really give you pause. Part of what distinguishes successful modern economic powerhouses like the United States and Western Europe from countries that struggle with economic growth is the fact that we have independent courts that enforce laws that are clear. Well, in the United States, that's no longer the case, apparently. The biggest risk to business is not additional costs or the possibility that they'll get sued. All businesses know that they'll get sued. That's just part of business. What they want is some kind of confidence that the laws that have been established in the past are going to be things that they can count on, so that they know if they are sued, well, they'll know how to respond to it. And even without getting sued, they'll know how to behave. Businesses, frankly, would much rather know that they're going to have a cost imposed upon them, that their competitors are also going to have to pay, because the law makes it clear that they have to pay that, than some law where it's unclear whether they're going to have to pay it or not because you don't know how the courts are going to rule. Well, the arbitrary nature of the court's rulings lately are starting to get attention. And that's shown, by the way, by how Congress, at a number of junctures, has passed legislation explicitly repudiating the decisions of the Supreme Court. This is something that should give the Supreme Court pause, frankly, and I think is of big concern to Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. It's part of the reason that in this overruling of the gerrymandered Alabama map, that Justice Roberts actually voted with the 3 liberal justices. He's concerned about the credibility of the court going forward, because unlike Congress, the court has no ability to provide funding. And unlike the executive, the court controls no military. As former President Andrew Jackson once stated in 1832, in response to the Supreme Court's decision Worcester v. Georgia, a case about Native American rights, President Jackson then said, "John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it." The point that Jackson was making is that the court has really no power in and of itself. The only way the Supreme Court has power is if the American people respect it. And at no time in history has the Supreme Court been less respected than it is now, with majorities believing that the Supreme Court is both out of touch with the American people and has become nothing more than a partisan body. My hope is as people realize the danger that this kind of erratic behavior by an out-of-control right-wing court becomes more and more public, that momentum will build for real reform. That will make it once again so the Supreme Court once again becomes a body that we can be proud of. Well, if you like this video, why don't you check out this video about how the Supreme Court has made erratic rulings on abortion rights. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.